What would you do if the man who once saved your life was now about to lose his freedom forever? Would you stay silent? Or would you rise, even if the whole world stood against him? This is the story of Walter Greene, an old black man who had nothing to his name but a kind heart. And yet, he gave everything he had to raise two children who weren't his own. And 20 years later, those same children would return to repay a debt that could never truly be measured. Walter Greene had never been the kind of man people noticed. He lived in a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood, worked long shifts at a warehouse, and spent most of his evenings reading old books or tinkering with small repairs around his home. He wasn't wealthy, he wasn't powerful, but he was steady, humble, and above all, good. One cold December night, after finishing a late shift, Walter cut through a narrow alley to shorten his walk home. The city was quiet, the streets coated in frost, his breath visible in the air. At first, he thought the faint sound he heard was a stray cat. But as he stepped closer, he realized it wasn't an animal at all. It was the sound of children crying. Behind a rusted dumpster, he found them, two small figures huddled together. A boy, maybe 8 years old, clutching the hand of a girl no older than 5. Their faces were pale, their clothes torn and dirty, and their eyes wide with fear. They looked like they hadn't eaten in days. Walter crouched down, his heart aching at the sight. "Hey there," he said gently. "It's all right. I'm not going to hurt you." The boy tightened his grip on his sister. He didn't trust strangers. Why should he? But Walter didn't push. He took off his coat, wrapped it around the little girl's shoulders, and set a piece of bread he had in his bag on the ground. Then he stepped back. Slowly, cautiously, the children edged forward. Hunger overcame fear, and soon they were devouring the food. Walter's heart broke as he watched. He knew that if he walked away now, these children might not survive the winter. So he didn't. "Come with me," he said softly. "Just for tonight. I'll keep you safe." The boy hesitated, but the girl tugged his hand, and together, they followed Walter out of the alley. That night, Walter's tiny apartment became a haven. He gave them blankets, warm soup, and a place to sleep. The boy's name was Ethan. His sister was Lily. Their parents had disappeared long ago, too lost in their own addictions to care for their children. For weeks, the siblings had been wandering from shelter to shelter, alley to alley, with no one to turn to. Walter didn't ask too many questions. He didn't need to. He simply knew he couldn't let them go back out into the cold. From that day on, his life changed completely. He worked harder than ever at the warehouse, taking extra shifts to afford food and school supplies. He skipped meals so Ethan and Lily could eat enough. He mended their clothes by hand, read to them at night, and reminded them, over and over, that they were safe now, that they mattered. Ethan grew strong under Walter's guidance, determined, hardworking, protective of his little sister. Lily blossomed with warmth and laughter, her eyes no longer clouded by fear. To them, Walter was not just a kind stranger. He was their father. But the world can be cruel to men like Walter. His boss at the warehouse, Harold Mercer, was a man who thrived on power. Wealthy, arrogant, and used to getting his way, Mercer despised Walter's quiet dignity. He saw him as weak, a man easy to exploit. So when a large sum of company money went missing, Mercer wasted no time finding his scapegoat. Evidence was twisted. Documents were falsified. And before Walter could even understand what was happening, he was being accused of theft. The whispers began almost immediately. "He's always been too quiet," one coworker said. "You never know what someone like that is hiding." "He's desperate," another added. "Raising kids that aren't even his. Maybe he needed the money." The rumors spread like wildfire. By the time Walter's case reached the courtroom, the damage was done. The trial was merciless. Walter sat in chains, his dark skin and weary frame making him an easy target for suspicion in the eyes of the jury. Mercer painted himself as the victim, describing how he trusted Walter only to be betrayed. Witnesses lied. Records were forged. And every time Walter tried to defend himself, he was silenced. "Thief," people whispered from the gallery. "Liar," unworthy of mercy. Walter kept his head high, but inside, despair weighed heavily. He thought of Ethan and Lily, now grown, who had long since moved away to build their own lives. He had never told them about his troubles. He didn't want to burden them. He would rather they remembered him as strong, not broken. And now, it seemed his life was about to end inside a prison cell. The judge's gavel was raised, ready to strike. Walter's heart sank. His hands trembled in their cuffs. For the first time in decades, he felt truly alone. But just then, the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom creaked open. Two figures stepped inside. A young man and a young woman, walking with purpose, their eyes fixed on Walter. The young man's voice rang out, steady and clear. "My name is Ethan. This is my sister, Lily, and we are here to tell you who Walter Greene really is." Gasps rippled through the room. The judge paused, startled. The jurors turned in their seats. Walter's eyes widened, his breath catching in his throat. It couldn't be. The children he once saved had returned. And now, they were about to save him. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Every pair of eyes turned toward the young man and woman who had just walked in. Their clothes were neat but simple, their expressions fierce with determination. They were no longer the frightened children Walter had found in that frozen alley all those years ago. They were adults now, strong, confident, unafraid. Ethan stepped forward first, his voice calm but charged with emotion. "Your Honor," he said firmly, "I know you are about to sentence Walter Greene to prison. But before you do, you need to hear the truth. Because the man you are about to condemn is not a thief. He is the reason my sister and I are alive today." The judge frowned, tapping the gavel lightly. "Young man, this is highly irregular." "Please," Ethan interrupted, his voice breaking for a moment. "Just give us a chance. If you truly want justice, then let us speak. You need to know who Walter really is." The room murmured with curiosity. Some looked irritated, others intrigued. The judge hesitated, but finally leaned back in his chair. "Very well," he said, "but keep it brief." Ethan took a deep breath, and his eyes softened as they turned toward Walter. "I was 8 years old when I first met him. My sister Lily was only 5. We had been abandoned, left to starve in the streets. I remember trying to keep her warm at night, holding her hand so she wouldn't cry herself to sleep. I thought we were going to die out there." His words hung heavy in the air. The jurors shifted uncomfortably. And then, Ethan continued, "Walter found us. He didn't know who we were. He had no reason to care. But he gave us food, shelter, and, more than anything, he gave us hope. He took us into his home when no one else would. A black man with barely enough money for himself. Yet he chose to raise 2 white kids who meant nothing to him." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Harold Mercer, sitting smugly at his table, scowled and leaned toward his lawyer. But Ethan wasn't finished. "Walter Greene is not a thief. He is the most honest, selfless man I have ever known. Every meal we ate came from his sacrifice. Every book we read, every school uniform we wore. He worked extra hours, skipped meals, and patched our clothes so we could have a chance at life. He didn't just save us from the cold that night. He saved us every single day for years." Lily stepped forward now. Her voice was softer than her brother's, but no less powerful. "I remember being 5, she said, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. "I was so scared all the time. I didn't trust anyone. But Walter, he had the gentlest smile. He would read to me before bed, even when he was so tired from work that he could barely keep his eyes open. He told me I mattered. Do you understand how powerful that is to a child who thought she was worthless?" Her eyes welled with tears. "When I had nightmares, he sat by my bed until I fell asleep again. When I was sick, he stayed home from work, risking his job, just to take care of me. He never once raised his voice. He never once made us feel like a burden. He wasn't just a guardian. He became our father." By now, the courtroom had grown completely silent. Even the judge seemed to lean forward, his stern mask cracking ever so slightly. Ethan stepped closer to the defense table, his voice rising. "You think this man stole money? You think he betrayed anyone? No. The only betrayal here is what's being done to him right now. This trial is built on lies, and I know exactly why." Harold Mercer framed him. "Because Walter is humble, quiet, and easy to target. Mercer thought no one would stand up for him. Well, he was wrong." Ethan pointed directly at Mercer, whose face turned red with fury. "You're the real thief. You've been exploiting workers for years, taking advantage of people who don't have the power to fight back. But Walter does have people who will fight for him. He has us." Lily's voice joined in, trembling but strong. "If Walter goes to prison today, then the world is punishing the wrong man. And it will be punishing us too. Because without him, we wouldn't even be alive to stand here before you. Walter Greene gave 2 abandoned children a second chance at life. He gave us everything. And now it's our turn to give something back. We will not let him be destroyed by lies." Tears streamed down her cheeks. She turned to Walter, her voice breaking. "Dad, we love you. And we're not leaving until they see the truth." Walter's chest tightened. For the first time during the entire trial, his eyes brimmed with tears. He had kept his pain hidden, his dignity intact. But seeing Ethan and Lily, his children, standing tall, defending him with every ounce of courage, was more than he could bear. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, louder now, uncertain. Jurors glanced at one another, some clearly shaken by the siblings' words. Even the judge seemed rattled, unsure how to proceed. But one thing was certain. The story of Walter Greene was no longer about accusations or false evidence or Harold Mercer's lies. It had become something much greater. A story of sacrifice, love, and the kind of truth that no courtroom walls could contain. And as the gavel hesitated once more in the judge's hand, it was clear this trial was far from over. Have you ever wondered if one act of courage could overturn decades of injustice? For Walter Greene, that moment had finally arrived. The courtroom was charged with anticipation. Walter's hands remained cuffed, but his heart raced with a mixture of fear and hope. All eyes were on the jury, all ears waiting for the final verdict. The gavel had not yet fallen, and the air seemed heavy with possibility. The lead juror rose slowly. After hearing the testimony of Ethan and Lily Greene, along with the countless witnesses who spoke to Mr. Greene's character, and reviewing the evidence presented, we have reached a verdict. Whispers rippled through the room. Walter held his breath. His mind raced back to that fateful day in the alley, when he had taken in 2 abandoned children, unaware that their lives, and now his own fate, would be forever intertwined. The juror continued. We, the jury, find the defendant, Walter Greene. A pause stretched long enough to feel eternal. Walter's eyes flicked to Ethan and Lily, who were holding each other's hands tightly, their faces a mixture of anxiety and hope. Not guilty of all charges. A gasp escaped the courtroom. Ethan and Lily let out a breath they didn't realize they were holding, tears welling in their eyes. Walter's knees almost buckled as relief and disbelief crashed over him like waves. He looked at the jurors, the judge, and then finally at his children. For the first time in years, he felt freedom, not just from the chains of the courtroom, but from the heavy burden of fear and false accusations that had shadowed his life. The judge nodded solemnly. Mr. Greene, you are free to go. As the shackles fell away, Walter stood, trembling. He could hardly comprehend what had just happened. He embraced Ethan and Lily, holding them tightly, feeling the warmth of family and the power of truth prevailing over deceit. Outside the courtroom, the sun shone brighter than it had in years. Walter's steps felt lighter as he walked with Ethan and Lily, knowing that the life he had dedicated to others' happiness had now been acknowledged. The alley where he had found them, the small home they had shared, the sacrifices he had made, they were all pieces of a life that had proven itself to be worth more than any false accusation. The story didn't end with the verdict. The community, inspired by Walter's integrity and the bravery of Ethan and Lily, rallied around him. Neighbors came forward to support him, friends offered assistance, and even former colleagues who had doubted him expressed regret and admiration. Walter's life became a testament to the power of honesty, kindness, and steadfast courage in the face of injustice. Ethan and Lily, who had grown into adults of remarkable strength and character, became advocates for children in need, ensuring that no other child would experience the despair they once had. Walter, who had once felt powerless and forgotten, now found himself at the center of a movement for hope and change. And though the scars of the past would never completely fade, Walter understood something profound. True wealth was not measured in material possessions or accolades, but in the lives he had touched and the love he had given freely. As the sun set over the city, Walter stood on the steps of the courthouse, flanked by Ethan and Lily. They had faced lies, betrayal, and cruelty, but together they had shown that truth, loyalty, and courage could conquer even the darkest of circumstances. In that moment, Walter Greene smiled, knowing that the gavel of justice had fallen not only on the courtroom, but on life itself, and it had rung true. This was more than a story of survival. It was a story of redemption, love, and the unbreakable bonds that define family.